Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. It is. Today is the 24th day of November 2023. My channel is called Discerning What is True. I'm on YouTube and also on Facebook and on Odyssey. Uh, I'm going to be sharing a particular book that was done by Rene Schwaller de Lubicz, Esoterism and Symbol. So I've been reading this particular book um, and wanted to share this with you guys. So let's get into it. And let's see what we got here. Hold on a second here. So it's the contents here. We're going to go through this just the sections, and then we're going to be reading in it. It's like 19 sections, roughly about 75 pages long. So thank you for being here. And let's get into the work here. This was done back, I think, in the 1940s. It's probably 1947, as well as I recollect. And hope all is well with everyone too, since everybody has celebrated Thanksgiving yesterday, I assume. And yes, okay, just checking things out here, making sure everything looks okay. Okay. Esotericism has no common measure with deliberate concealment of the truth, that is, with secrecy in the conventional sense of the term. If it were otherwise, writings such as the Egyptian pyramid texts, the Vedas, Upanishads, Upanishads of India, and China's Tao Te Ching, the Genesis of Moses, the Gospels, the Revelations, and others would have to be drought thought of a colossal mystification. It is inconceivable that scholars, philosophers, theologians, and in general, philosophers, theologians, and in general, all those interested in the history of the world would not yet have understood the importance of the pyramid texts. No other scriptural texts preserved and transmitted across the millennia because of their sacred nature have reached us intact in form. Various transcriptions, that is, translations and commentaries, if they have not altered the fundamental meaning, at best leave room for doubt as to the original form, which is precisely the vehicle for esotericism. Carved in stone, the writings in the chambers of the Fifth Dynasty pyramids have been preserved, unaltered for 4,000 years. The Samaritan treasure as a sacred relic, a Bible they claim as authentic, which here at this holy place of Egypt, ignorant but curious tourists brushed carelessly against these carved stones, where every feature, each line, each arrangement, that is, text, each color has a particular significance. There being no doubt that every detail is intentional. Although we may not yet know how to interpret these words, let us at least preserve them for those who will come after us. Was it not greatly to the credit of Bonaparte's mission that it scrupulously copied texts which, at the time, no one yet knew how to decipher? That's true. They basically wrote down these things down because they were afraid that basically something might happen to them. They were afraid that somehow this possibility, someone mar them, one would mess them up, or some type of catastrophe. If the intention of the Gospels, for example, were to give to mankind a moral code for ordinary life, and if the way towards the Father were explicitly in simple terms, then why hinder us from reaching this aim by speaking in parables? Why should all these writings hide what can be openly said in order to help the unhappy masses of this world? Was it through a perverse need to create a mystery that is a opium for the masses, as the materialists say? Was it because the world of those days was so uncultural in comparison with ours, which is so highly intelligent? Question mark. Would it be because those prophets and God-inspired men did not better know how to express themselves? We have enough evidence of the intelligence, wisdom, and unquestionably high degree of civilization reached in the past to warrant dismissing such assumptions. On the other hand, no cryptograph or riddle remains undecipherable. It is therefore naive to believe that such texts as ancient Egypt had left us in great profusion would base a esoteric meaning on a mystification of this sort, or such esotericism expressly but by writing. In the composition of sacred texts, the cryptography and the riddle never have any purpose other than to awaken the reader's attention, to place an accent on one aspect of the text, in short, to guide him towards the esoteric sense of the writings. The same applies to a play or words or a parable. Esotericism can be neither written nor spoken, and hence cannot be betrayed. One must be prepared to grasp it, to see it, and to hear it. This preparation is not a knowing, but a being able, and can ultimately be acquired only through the effort of the individual himself by a struggle against all obstacles and a victory over the human animal nature. There is a sacred science, and for thousands of years, countless inquisitive people have sought in vain to penetrate its secrets. It is as if they have attempted to dig a hole in the sea with an axe. The tool must be of the same nature as the objective to be worked upon. Spirit is found only with spirit, and esotericism is the spiritual aspect of the world, inaccessible to several cerebral intelligence. Those who profess to reveal the esotericism of such teachings are charlatans. They may try to explain the implications of a certain word or formula as with a conventional secret, but with regard to sacred science, they will never be able to do more than put one word in place of another. And at best, this will be bad literature replacing a simple idea. The true initiative can guide a gifted pupil, that is, and help him to travel more quickly along the path to consciousness. And the pupil, upon reaching stages of illumination, by his own inner light, will read the esotericism of such teachings directly. No one can do it for him. There is in man a cerebral intelligence and also innate intelligence called intelligence of the heart. Yeah, I was going to make a comment here. Hold on a second. Let me finish this up. The latter comes into being through a fusion of the cosmic cause, which is contained in its materialization, with the same cause which is in us. This is possible because the nature of both causes is identical. Yeah, I was looking at someone who shared something about a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, actually poo-pooing the idea of actually having a brain and using it, but yet lifting up the heart. The key, folks, is simply this: you have to have both. You have to be able to think and understand, and yet you got to have a heart to love truth. It's got to be something that both work on. But I find it in the day we live in, it's always about division. That's what people are about these days. They and I've been a part of that, so I can't say I'm any better. But it's just like the right and left path, so to speak. It's neither, folks. It's neither. You see, that's the problem. The right hand path and the left hand path. You hear this constantly. Um, Maybe it's better to use the middle path. The one that's less trodden. Anyway, as long as we are placed in duality before nature, we judge it objectively. Original sin, quote, is the separation, hence the opposition of complementary aspects whose merging makes for unity, just as the superimposed color reds and green result in the colorless. In this unity, our cerebral, that is our brain, intelligence can no longer discern anything and so has no further role to play. It needs opposition in order to function, you see. We and the object, man and woman, yes and no, night and day, light and shade. Thus, in every living organism constitutes a senseless oscillation between birth and death, increase and decrease. The red rods and cones in the retina of the eye intercept the color green, neutralize this color, and excite a complementary reaction to the optic nerve, which sees green as opposed to red. Thus, the separative, that is, your mind's function is entirely based on a principle of crossing, as, for example, the right side of the brain generally controls the left side of the body. Likewise, a concrete image, the vision of an object, evokes its qualification of quantitative description. This is a knowledge, or this is accomplished by abstract elements which are themselves the result of comparisons. Conversely, it is impossible for the brain, that is its intelligence, to conceive of abstraction without defining it by a concrete image. But here we must be aware of distinguishing moments of knowledge, that is, from intelligence from the brain, from moments of intelligence of the heart. We will return to this later. The origin of the universe being one single and unique source of energy. There is, owing to this common fraternity, a communion among all things in the world. There is a kinship, I should say, Kinship, between a certain mineral and a plant, an animal and a man. They are linked by being of the same nature, because in the final analysis there is only a simple series of basic characteristics, whence by combinations innumerable possibilities emerge. These can, however, be classified in a few large families and their subgroups. Despite the variety of the races of humanity, each consisting of a multitude of very diverse individuals, all men are organized in essentially the same way. What distinguishes one from another is the state of consciousness, and hence his mental control, his particular psyche and sexual life, and consequently his affinities. The variable moment, therefore, is of an abstract order, but can be perfectly well observed and analyzed in its effects. On the other hand, the abstract cause, in a state of genesis within the concrete and apparently stable scheme of man's organic constitution, is beyond rational analysis. A totality of purely bodily experiences evidently maintains this genesis, but individual and group heredity play a part of this as well. Here again, one can speak of physiological adaptations transmitted by heredity, but the impulse towards this genesis must nevertheless still be provided by an incomprehensible moment, which in some could be called formless concentration in the transmitting seed. Our common origin is by no means remote. It does not take us back into the primitive darkness. It is present and constant in that man feels directly or indirectly on all the kingdoms, and thus enters into constant exchange with their particular natures, and finally, by way of the mineral origin, with the cosmic energy from which everything else arises. It is completely impossible for our minds to conceive something which is not a part of concrete nature, and which we have not experienced through our bodily becoming. The dog cannot understand man. It can be aware of him physically insofar as he is physical, but it can no more understand him than the musket can understand the horse, or the plant, the musket. It is because they lack the necessity cerebral organ, most certainly. But what brings about this organ? Does this plant, thrusting upward, have the mentality to understand the sky? Yet it makes no mistake. There is an innate intelligence which is precisely the characteristic nature of this entity. And man possesses this innate nature also. Himself is the mineral of his bones, and the vegetable matter of the tissues, of the organs, and the animal coordination of his organs, which together make up his laboratory of assimilation and transformation as an independent being. We define this innate intelligence too glibly by the word instinct. We would do well to examine what comprises this and whence it comes. Intelligence depends upon the senses, the recordings of observed facts, and the comparisons of ideas. No element of the cerebral intelligence is abstract, and every quantitative or abstract idea results from the comparison of concrete elements. The cerebrate organ is formed by stages. For this, the organism must develop three faculties: that of the senses, that which records observations, and that which compares the recorded ideas, namely memory. Reason, about which we shall speak later, is of a different order. For now we are still speaking only of the human animal. The senses are the organs by which the principal elements are perceived. Touch, the tactile sense, is of the earth, that is, of everything forming a material obstacle to the matter of the body. The body of the wind is earth, as is the body of water or stone. The senses are aware of activity only by opposing it with a resistance of identical nature. Taste is related to water, and nothing, be it a gas or a solid, can be tasted unless it be slightly dissolved. Thus, there is a water principle in everything. The sense of smell belongs to air, because nothing can be smelled unless it is be volatile or made so, as, for example, by heat. And so there is an air principle in all things. Also, sight belongs to fire. Nothing can be seen without the radiance of fire. Just as a piece of iron, dark in darkness, becomes dull red and then dazzling white if heated by invisible energy. The heat of ordinary fire belongs to touch and not to sight. Thus, the fire principle exists in all visible things. Hearing belongs to the quint element, the word, which becomes perceptible physically and tangible through sound. The first four senses pass through the brain. The fifth sense, hearing, passes through the heart without speaking directly to the brain. It is the spiritual sense, the door to intelligence of the heart. Yeah, that's right. That's something I discovered the other day. The fifth sense, that is the hearing, does not go through the brain. It goes to the heart. Each thing has its own sound. All things communicate with one another through the principal elements. The spheres to which our human genesis has not yet attained escape us, as long as we cannot transform them and reduce them to the principal element of the spheres of our inborn intelligence. All scientific instrumentation is but a reduction of this kind. There are aspects of fire, air, and water, and earth, which we have not yet perceived in the realm preceding us. It is therefore perfectly reasonable to admit the possible existence of a world interpenetrating the aspect of things now perceptible to us, a world composed of exactly the same principal elements, just as there are light waves which our eyes cannot perceive, that is, infrared and ultraviolet. This still only concerns the possible expansion of the sensitivity of our senses, but the existence of the hearing faculties also allows us to believe in the existence of a principle or ideal state corresponding like the principal elements to principal forms. The fact that there is in man, once he has passed beyond the simple human animal stage, the possibility of conceiving abstractions which the cerebral intelligence cannot understand as such, demonstrates the existence of a world parallel to ours in constitution, but entirely different in aspect, extent, and genesis. This genesis would then be a genesis of return, just as from the source to ourselves there is a genesis of bodily becoming. The cerebral intelligence which we see develop in the higher animal aspect of man is strictly limited by the boundaries imposed on the senses. Intelligence of the heart, to the contrary, is independent of them and belongs to the great complex called life. The fundamental character of cerebral intelligence is that it is born of duality. Competent, which may also be called the sexualization of the universe. Quality is comprehensible only through the opposition of commentaries. Moreover, the idea of quality exists in nature only, that is, in its dualistic or dualized universe. Quality defines quantity inversely, that is, quantity compares with another quantity defines quality. Any so-called abstract idea exists only if we can limit it by a quantity. We can be satisfied with words and say, for example, horizon or axis, and construct sentences with these words, but as soon as we try to analyze their meanings, we are bound to make them objective. Otherwise, our celibate abilities come to a halt, as abstraction must be made concrete, or else it will be impossible for us to understand. The word axis is a typical example, since this idea, which we qualify as imaginary, cannot be imagined that is made objective. Yet the axis, quote, not to be confused with axial, is a fundamental characteristic of every rotating body. This again confirms the probability of intelligence different from that of our celibate possibilities, since our corporate world shows us the indisputable existence of functions and even of forms which unquestionably exist, and yet always have been and will remain entirely beyond the grasp of this single separate instrument alone. We have borrowed the term intelligence of the heart from the ancient Egyptians in order to designate that other aspects of man which allows us to penetrate beyond our animal limits, and which in truth makes for human man's characteristic progression towards divine man. The awakening of this original principle that lies dormant in every living human being. Intelligence of the heart is purely a function of the spirit's innate consciousness. The heart beats its rhythm, not because it is driven by a motor, but because it is itself the motor of blood circulation. Each cell of the heart beats this rhythm, and Dr. Carroll, Carrel, experiment demonstrates what was well known to ancient wisdom concerning innate intelligence and consciousness. Each organic being, and even each cell of the organ of an organized being, has its part in the general life, which is its personal specification. Man's heart is not alone in beating rhythmically like a motor. There are aquatical beings that are entirely a heart of this kind and represents the awakening of the consciousness, which will become heart. Another consciousness will become liver. Another will become lung, and thus each function has its organ. Compared with an apparent inert mineral, for example, such as an organ is the incarnation of a consciousness, of a cosmic function which has received corporate life. A museum accordingly classified the evolution of consciousness or the becoming of life as natural history would be much more authentic than our displays of dead specimens. Every natural object in the universe is a hieroglyph of divine science. Each animal, each species of plant, each mineral group is a stage in the process of becoming aware of the cosmic cause, culminating in the complete organism of human man, the microcosm, man in his image. The whole, thus formed into a complete living being, is a language that speaks. It expresses itself ceaselessly in its functions, in its living functions, and represents the basis of the intelligence of the heart, which is the fact that remains related to all of nature and consequently knows nature. Knowledge of this kind cannot be objectified, but it is real. Reality is a fusion of consciousness with the object. There is identity. It is function experienced all by itself and innate in the organism, which constitutes intelligence of the heart. Obviously, therefore, we must be able to transcribe what is in us into our mental and objective consciousness by establishing a relationship between the life in us and the observations of that life in nature. This we find supremely well expressed by the ancient Egyptians. It is a knowledge of magic, pure and sane, which can lead rapidly towards the spiritual goal of our lives, owing to the fact that we can solve, by means of the symphony of analogies in our surroundings, the consciousness of the heart latent in us. Fundamentally, consciousness has two aspects. One is the result of comparisons, the other is of identification. Both aspects need to be inscribed. One is an organic or celibate inscription, the other is vital and or functional. If we would be absurd to expect an identical functioning for celibate consciousness and innate consciousness, the meaning of the term consciousness must be outlined and defined. We lack a suitable vocabulary for this meaning as we find it established in the ancient Egyptian and Hindu languages by masters of wisdom. So let us say that celebrate consciousness is the result of quantitative experience, that is, a mechanical consciousness resulting from comparison. Memory in itself is no more than a phonograph record or a cinematographic film. A single impression is no more than an isolated groove of this record or one frame of this film. Functional memory, the definition of an impression recorded in this function, begins only with comparison. Even mechanically, one has to resort to magic, that is, to giving an impulse by evoking impressions. For example, a particular flash of lightning evokes an entire scene from the past. A scent recalls an impression experienced long ago. A word ignites remembrance of a thought heard or read or read and may give rise to a long series of thoughts of concordance. A fact recorded by the senses into what triggers recollection and agreements or disagreements results in logical or illogical thought or sophistry. The entire cerebral mechanism can be reproduced mechanically. So much the better, as this will show the most obtuse of us where the error lies. But when we want to go beyond academic know-how, that cirrhosis of the spirit to fertile thought, the cerebral mechanism is no longer adequate. When we just say that we must necessarily turn to what constitutes true magic, namely evocation, and that there is agreement or disagreement in the assemblage of recall ideas. We were appealing to another power in us, which comes from our innate consciousness, the source of the sense of harmony, if it is effective. This power will be the reason for genius, or his creative thought, creative in the sense that it works ahead of the known, the classified. Isn't it this consciousness of a new way dictated to today's decadent world, which impels artists to destroy the idols of yesterday in order to attempt irrational expression? This is a key figure of what he's saying here, clear thought. We think that we're progressing somehow, folks, and what we're doing is we're destroying other things in the past, which basically says we're irrational, is what it's saying. They seek a concordance of the elements of sensation, ignoring the rational combination which only satisfies the inertia of acquired habit. Atmospheres, images, and forms are created to evoke a feeling, an emotion, to provoke a vital reaction. Art is the herald of the mentality of a period, the harbinger of its innermost tendencies. Intelligence of the heart, which establishes the relationship between innate consciousness and its observation of fact, is identification. Identification means to live with it and to live in the observed fact, to be that fact oneself, to suffer it, to act in it, to rejoice with it. It's sympathetic consciousness, not a subjective consciousness such as logical would like to oppose to. This is up to objective consciousness. Yet, confusion between the two is easy. Cerebral consciousness is graphically inscribed in the cerebral matter, as we have just stated. Innate consciousness is described in the nature of the organism, meaning that the motive power of its function is the impulse of its necessity, the idea or principle of harmony in man. As already in the higher animal, this creates emotivity. The greater the sensitivity of the emotional faculty, the better innate consciousness can express itself. If then the observed fact provokes a sensation, an emotional reaction of an egocentric order, this will be subjective consciousness. If the fact is observed by an individual in a state of neutrality, an impersonal state, this will be sympathetic consciousness. All these problems thus have their solution in the cultivation of self, its detachment from egoism. In the mastery of thought, mentation, the cerebral cinema. The inscription of innate or sympathetic consciousness is vital or functional if life as such and function as such are considered the very principle of living nature. Thus, this principle is a reality beyond corporate matter, but is but it assumes a body. It incarnates by means of the harmony of the eminent elements. When a certain number of elements exist, their relationship brings one or another function into play. For example, the earth breathes, the crab emerges from the sea, a plant germinates, the male palm tree grows towards the male female palm tree. Function is necessary, and the latter pertains to the living law or Genesis, whose order effectively effectuates the entire play of nature, inborn knowledge of which is sacred science. Everything, absolutely everything, obeys this divine mandate, which is a simple set of functions imposed on the universe, and no intelligence can resist it. No power can hinder it. It is order, the harmony of the causal cause working through the cosmic cause. The incarnation in man of all the necessities or functions, orders, or what we call world harmony, is the temple, where the original creative energy connects the intelligence of the heart, innate consciousness, with the universe. This comes about through objective observation of fact in order to arrive at a cosmic consciousness independent of destructible or moral components. The science of this consciousness returns to the source, that is, Christ arisen returns to the right of his Father, not into his Father, is spiritual psychology, and it speaks to us in this life, through life. Everything that lives, this is section 6, I'm sorry, everything that lives moves. This movement is either quantitative, in space and time, or quantitative, or formal. That is, it defines space and time. Force, in this case, is considerably an ideal prior to form, substance, or matter. Thus, there is apparent life, and the life which causes what is apparent. Many attempts have been made to define life, but the only perfect definition would be that of life as divine presence. The term dead body is applied to a mineral, a dead plant, an inert animal that neither moves nor breathes, incapable of assimilating food or experiencing a outer action of expressing a feeling, a thought. In short, a cessation of the conscious relationship of the being with the environment. Both aesthetically or catalepsy brings about all this to some extent, as does deep natural sleep. Actually, a body is not dead until it decomposes into its constitutional elements. Thus, after cerebral consciousness has disappeared, there is still a possible vital subconscious with inapparent death, an innate life of matter after suppression of the subconsciousness. Consequently, there is a continuation of dying during bodily decomposition. In fact, it's impossible to kill a being born within nature. That is, be it mineral or man. Life is immanent in everything, from the indestructible fixed salt of the bones to complex consciousness. For instance, or for once, Lavoisier, I'm just going to spell this to you, Lavoisier, Lavoisier, Lavoisier was correct, but not in the sense he intended. For if nothing can be lost, that which cannot be lost is always the same and unique thing, and everything ultimately is reduced to that same and unique thing. We must speak about death in order to understand life. Definitely, death does not exist. There are only changes of non-permanent states. Permanence resides in the original cause. The transcendental is in the phase of self-awareness. The impulse towards this universe genesis is the life which causes what is apparent. If definite death does not exist, and this refers only to the natural being and not to the animated man, it is because everything is life, whether this life has bodily form or whether it is metaphysical or form without body. That is, the idea of the form becomes embodied. In the same way, the energetic lines of force of a mother solution are necessary to the crystal or the ensemblage of dispersed molecules. But there is also the obium from which the fetus is generated. This no longer pertains to an assembly of molecules dispersed in a solution. It is the corporal formation of energy elements selected by the idea within the nutritional medium, the seed, or paternal impulse is the idea. Spirit, The divine cause is much closer to us than our poor brains can imagine. Is the seed anything but metaphysical idea of the corporate form it is going to generate? Is a catalyst anything other than this energetic idea of the compound is bringing about? Is the esoteric teaching of sacred science did not make it possible to prove that spirit is a fact or to demonstrate what occurs in consciousness and in the successive phases of the dying of the body and of the transitory form? Then all this teaching would be but gratuitous philosophical speculation devoid of value. We say God, and do not know what this means. We say spirit, and do not understand this abstraction. We say energy, and know nothing whatsoever of its nature. We see effects and attributes to them, a cause which is sometimes God, sometimes spirit, word, and sometimes energy. Words which take the place of ignorance, but hypothesis we cannot avoid formulating. Mere speculation cannot resolve these problems. It can only collect concrete material elements perceived by the senses, that is. The metaphysical makes no sense to the mind's reasoning. On the other hand, once abstraction is hypothesized as the premise, we must seek the solution by the means at our disposal. These means are simply the teachings of nature, of which we are the ultimate product, and our natural communion with her. When we want to express our knowledge, we must be able to translate or reduce it to concrete terms, accessible to our senses and rational through the cerebral function, that is sympathetic experience, always remains uncertain and open to discussion as long as it is not objectified experience. Thus, to be as certain of our innate knowledge as we are of our learned knowledge, we must search for the experimental proof demonstrating that spirit, the abstract, actually becomes concrete by a definite route. Sacred science affirms that this is possible. He teaches this through his esotericism, which is hermetically sealed only from a cerebral intelligence, and which will remain so unless we cultivate another aspect of intelligence and a mentality other than those sweeping off the granular flora which are our schools. This is why the sages leave speculation to the idle and contemplate nature. Nature teaches everything. A sound evokes all its harmonics. Acorn evolves the oak. A harmonic complex, which in the plant kingdom is oak. But musical harmonics are bodily vibrations of aquatic nature. The seed, sound, or acorn, grain, or spermazone is of a specific nature, and this specification is the genesis of seeds from mineral to man, the spatial reduction of substance without form. There is no first seed, and the egg preceded the chicken. The substance of this egg has always existed as substance without form, the cosmic version, the sperm of the rooster. To the contrary, it becomes generated in the passage from cosmic nebula to itself. The crystal principle, on the other hand, indirect fertilization without specific seed, a leap from the abstract origins to the ultimate human product, man-God. Number 7. Appearance is the dualization of a single principle and defines nature or living spirit. The causal cause is incomprehensible unity, and metaphysically from one becomes two, which results in the cosmic cause, threefold in one unity, the latter thus being accessible. It is beyond our power to imagine anything that would not be possible. In fact, that is imagination, or any combination of ideas can only be composed of simple elements which are accessible. Thus, materialistic philosophy, when it is logically consistent, has a real basis in nature, but one unknown fact will mean an error in logic. It may be said everything has always existed, and the varieties are the object of evolution. This statement is both true and false. It is false if considered by bodily senses and cerebral intelligence alone. It is true spiritually because spirit or substance without form is eternal. It is that from which every body is formed. Evolution also is real, starting from the original energetic impulse, but it obeys a law of universal genesis and not fortuitous conditions. Surely the function does not create the organ. How could it act before existing? Adaptation is not creation, and what is not created, that is contained in the harmonic order of the law of Genesis, will never be incarnated. As for the evolutionist theory of materialism, is a bankrupt for most thinkers. Besides, what is the good of philosophizing our own world has done for so many so many centuries? All our philosophies are but personal speculation compared with natural philosophy, the philosophy of living nature, and its summary as it's found in all sacred texts. In the beginning, there is separation. This we see still, sorry, in the beginning, there is separation. This we still see always and everywhere. We need the number two in order to define the number one, which is individual unity. It is impossible for us to understand. The grain decomposes in the earth, the seed in the ovule. When we can no longer divide, we are beyond nature and approach the causal cause, the abstract cause. This is why the whole of metaphysics, all creation is situated between the number one and two. Then the threefold idea forms a acceptable unity which can be divided and added. The Chinese sages said one always equals three. The Egyptian sages placed the triad at the origin of each line, as they placed the triangle at the origins of geometric forms. Two irreducible magnitudes are necessary to determine a third. The sages have never taught otherwise. Number 8, becoming or formation of substance into matter is the mystery of reflection. That is the phenomenon which is reaction. Neither action nor its reflector, that is the passive element of the nature, is a phenomenon. It is the reaction which is the effect of duality and thus relative appearance. And this is how the sacred cry has formed nature, the world, and the universe. We must look at this becoming as though we had been present at the fiat lux, at beginning of time, with the certainty of actual eyewitnessing experience. Nothing prevents us from so doing. For time exists only for our physical senses, and the beginning of time is always present. Were it not so, nothing would be maintained. Melchizedek and Osiris makes constant sacrifice. We see activity by its effect. In its absolute, the active principle escapes us. The interplanetary or stellar world is black, complete darkness in appearance. Should a body pass through, it will be luminous, lighted by the sun, perhaps, but it will be lighted because this space of darkness is in reality holy light. That's WHOLLY, light. Absolute activity is unique. It is casual cause and not cosmic cause. It is unity and not yet three in one. There must be an obstacle to measure the activity to limit it, give it value, a number so that it becomes natural. This already implies two, that is, activity and obstacle. It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him. Nature, the universe, is nothing but the measure of the unknowable one, that is the eternal God, the Almighty, because everything is virtually in him, in the self. This measure contains all the functions of measures, the innumerable fractions, each of which is a creation of this universe. The Egyptian cubits beautifully teach us the profound knowledge of those mastery of wisdom for whom schismaticism was synonymous with death. The opposition or obstacle in reality no more understandable than the activity. The body which passes through dark space is unknown to us, but it opposes this light which is dark to our eyes. How could it do so, were it not of the same nature as light? The void is not an obstacle, just a transparent glass, for example, is not obstacle to light. The thing which opposes must be of the same nature as the activity, and of the least a lesser activity. The subtraction is precisely the field of varieties. Subtraction, however, becomes division in a homogeneous medium. Let us suppose, for example, that milk is perfectly homogeneous medium. When the fatty substance rises as cream on the milk, the homogeneity is destroyed. There will be finally a watery whey, WHY, and butter. Division has taken place. The active has manifested through opposition. In this instance, the active was a state of energy which is called acid. This acid may be understood as provoking the separation of harmonious medium into water and fat. But from the first intimate separation, there will be the active and the obstacle. because the acid energy will have acted, finding in this medium the possibility of acting, that is, two separate things. Thus, the components of liquid milk are revealed, each with a very definite character, and even though they come from the same thing, they will no longer be at all in agreement. This crude example will serve to illustrate what we want to say. We do not want what energy is, but it manifests itself as activity in various aspects, according to the medium in the above example. It is acid, and everything complementary to this acid is alkaline. After separation, we find acid water and alkaline fat. If it is fully separated and pure, however, in this imperfect world, acid and alkaline always have a tendency to interchange. Here, light is the acid, therefore, what opposes it is alkaline, a lesser acid, and what is visible is fat, because it is separated from the water. That is the light of the body, illuminated in the darkness. The light which we see is only reaction. The activating light is cause, the obstacle, or the lesser reaching light is the passive. Adam knows himself. In Eve, he recognizes the flesh and blood he was without knowing it. Before that, being identified with his cause, he possessed knowledge. Now he has learned to know. These are the two intelligences of which the celibate is the fall from the other in the image of the Creator, but measure limited. This explanation might seem to be the esotericism of the words of Genesis, yet it is no more than a simple explanation, a Kabbalah or exegesis. Esotericism is something quite different. The entire universe or phenomenal world is dualistic or dualized unity. Appearance like reflected matter or activity against its own diminution or resistance. The part of lost activity becomes the quantitative part of things, though absolute activity is not thereby diminished. For example, we try to push a moving object which itself is moving at the same speed as we are, there will be no thrust. The difference in speed makes up the quantity of our effect. We cannot deny what is absurdum for our mental intelligence, because this mystery of fiat lux is ceaselessly produced before us. We can describe what takes place. We cannot say why it has happened, and thus we have to call upon another sense which will reveal to us the esotericism that is the mystery. If we are then unable to describe this esotericism we have known, we can at least consciously carry it out and put it into practice. But there are several stages to be passed through in order to arrive at that. The principle of reaction, which is reflection, is the law of vital phenomenon. Everything that appears is the effect of reaction. Every organism lives only because of its faculty for reaction. Neither food nor medication can simulate or heal without this reaction. You see, it takes two to tango here, so to speak. Sound, light, all the effects of energy are reaction. Nothing can grow without reaction. Changes in the social order, whether natural or artificial, are reaction. Reaction is a modification of action in the sense of dualization. In the reaction, there is a child who stems from the father and mother, the life impulse and the substance which receives the impulse and produces the living body. And the day begins with the lunar night, reflective light, the substance in which the action of the active solar day can then continue. Could natural fire exist without fuel? Fire without fuel is the causal cause. Thus, to speak of nature is to speak of duality, stability through equilibrium. But those who go highly are those who break through this stability, who know how to disunite in order to search the part for what is eternal. Eternal equals eternal, then there is no more separation, you see. Pursuing the absolute is as foolish as seeking security in mediocre stability, but to break up the latter without knowing how to deal with its parts is senseless. Destruction, that is, to take away what is, to undo what is done, to destroy or destroy a composite and put the pieces together again is all that free will can do. Choice in the realm of quantity. It is negative. To generate bodies is a power of polarizing spirit. Purification is a power of consciousness. It burns what is destructible in the parts in order to finally unify what is dualized. Which is the two working to create a one. Number 9, when classifying becomes into kingdoms, Genesis is time, matter or form substance is space, and activity or form is consciousness. Thus, activity, form, and idea are different aspects of the same pursuit. The self or cosmic consciousness, which crystallizes or is limited, is spatial form, specific or qualified. Time is the distance between the seed and its fruit, between the sperm and the birth of its product, between the creative impulse and the universe. Genesis time, we situate the cosmos and terrestrial cycles in its phases. There is concordance because the law of Genesis is identical for each thing. Duration is relative. Like the diameters of concentric circles, cycle within cycle. Thus, time in itself has no magnitude. There is only a difference of nature which situates within the kingdoms. That is a difference of specification. The becoming of metaphysics or energetic substance into physical matter or body is a spatial definition. The limitation which makes space, this is number. Thus, space is not that in which a body is situated, but the body itself, whereas the medium in which it exists is the abstract, metaphysical, energetic substance that corporate, nonetheless, of nothingness of which the world is made. That nothingness, which is all celibate intelligence, corporate and sensory, by nature, understands no other basis than the body, while it considers the non-corporate as the container or space. In reality, space is the all, the constant and absolute plenum. The body is a transitive limit and becomes, by its limitation, perceptive to the senses. Number is but a fraction of unity. Activity or idea or form is seed in general. In nature, a particular seed is reduced activity or resistance, primary action, new activity. It could be described as a concentrated portion of space or void, acting on this void as in a passive medium. This is no vain speculation if we deepen our experimental study in order to see what, in the end, nourishes everything. There is a transition between the abstract substance and the concrete seed, but there is a thread easily followed in order to know it. We can cite here the fact of the activity of electrical energy in the vacuum of Crookes tubes, that is Crookes tubes. In this still relative vacuum, polarized energy produces all these phenomena which have led science to the atom. The particularization of activity into seed is a stage in the becoming of consciousness, which begins with the primal material of all things. Between the number 1 and 2, the self becomes the one, that is the ego, the mathematical definition of the value of 1 as something in relation to itself. Next, with the material primal or original 1, the beginning of consciousness finally begins to blend into the self once all experiences have been acquired. We must therefore use 2 different methods of thinking and refuse to believe that one method alone can suffice, simply by changing the vocabulary to clarify problems so diverse in nature. As stated earlier, this would lead straight to the formation of nonsense. Number 10. There are 2 possible functions of logic, one celibate or mechanical, the other vital. The mechanical or syllogistic logic or quantitative results from a comparison of concrete or definite elements. Vital logic is the logic of genesis or generation of a material form. It is this crystallization by time of the abstract cause into spatial concrete form. The method of mechanical or celibate logic is analytical. Vital logic requires the faculty of synthesis as spatial vision. It seems folly to admit that there is any logic other than the classical centrism. How can one arrive at a conclusion when the given elements are abstract? Obviously, this is only possible in a mutable law becoming, that is. The great thought Great though unrecognized merit of Hermeticism was to formulate this law because of the obsession with alchemy. The mirage of gold, the philosophy of Hermeticism, has been neglected. Yet there is no difference between the formation and the pronouncement of the Mosaic Genesis, which in its essence we encounter in all sacred texts. In the process of generation, which demands the active impulse in the medium homogeneous with this activity, that is, as a seed in the earth is moistened by the water which fed the seed, there is always, before all else, decomposition, that is, purification of this material into a chaotic, melodious form. The second phase is the formation of a new center of attraction, that is, a nucleus or cell, which draws nutrient substance to it. This substance, in turn, constantly undergoes the same decomposition, which creates the success of death, which is decomposition, and of life, which is reconstruction, for regenerating substance and producing growth. Thus, in decomposition, there appears a part which is earth, meaning fixed, and another part which is water, that is volatile or nutritional. In a plant, one is the root, the other is the germ. In the cell, one is the nucleus and the other is cytoplasm. As for growth, it is limited by the active fire of the seed and assimilated power. This, roughly speaking, is the mechanism of becoming, beginning from a specific seed, and this function is repeated without stopping up to the formation of the new seed. What makes the mystery here is the nature of the nutrient substance. That is, in fact, if everything on earth merely grew out of existing chemical elements, growth would be no more than the constant migration of these simple elements from one complex to another, and reduction to their simple nature. But visibly, the earth increases. Humus is accumulated with the dust of our ancestors' bones. After billions of years, all the waters of the oceans would not suffice to make the rain which nourishes terrestrial vegetation. To assume a constant circulation of these same waters to an oversimplification. As intervals, the waters enters into all the materials that raise the level of the surface, covering over past civilizations, forming geological strata. The earth lives like everything else in the universe, meaning that spirit is reduced to space, or to things which return to that spirit after completing the cycle first. That is corporate genesis, then the cycle of genesis of consciousness. It's a characteristic of sacred texts that they develop each genesis in full detail, with every nuisance of meaning as a gnosis for those whose hearts are open. It is necessary to understand the reality of volume, and this is absolutely impossible to grasp cerebrally. We know that it exists, since our senses stem from it, but we always have to slice this volume in order to understand it. We understand addition and subtraction, since these concern quantity, but multiplication and division, that is, extension in volume and in decomposition into spatial components, are beyond our grasp. In the corporate genesis described above, the meaning of decomposition by purification completely escapes us, you see. Corruption, namely chemical displacement, is familiar to us, but creative purification has nothing in common with it. The hen's egg purifies in order to create the living germ, but corruption, to the contrary, destroys. Living purification gives rise to new elements which, chemically speaking, did not previously exist. There is much more hydrogen sulfide in a rotten egg than the traces of sulfur in a fresh egg could produce. You see, the mysterious albumin and abonoid substance are products of this genesis of life. What we would think is junk or, uh, not edible or whatever you want to call it, it works its way and becomes something else. It becomes something else that's actually beneficial. All attempts to describe this life are useless and will always deceive, just as it is impossible to explain how a point becomes a surface, how one becomes two. The Eleusinian esoteric theory is practical but absurd. It was employed in ancient Egypt for ordinary purposes, but sacred geometry began from volume and not from a point which results from the intersection of two lines which themselves came from the movement of the point. The whole of materialist rational philosophy is based on the absurd, and necessarily so, while esoteric philosophy or sacred science is based on fact in order to know cause. Everything is space, which means that it has volume. There is no point in the sense of one sole singularity comprehensive moment in the universe. The slice volume gives the planes. The angles of the line of intersection give the point, which in the simplest case is the result of the meeting of these three lines of intersection. The point is ternate, Ternard. The cosmic cause is ternate. Every comprehensive beginning is three in one. Everything resulting from this is comprehensible and constitutes rational science. The error of our science is to want to penetrate the mysteries of life through its ordinary means of comprehensive. To recognize the point which results from volume instead of following elusive proposition would be to adopt a wholly new attitude, accepting a priority of the existence of metaphysical world, meaning this would be wisdom, but we prefer the absurd because it is practical. It would be to search for a vital logic for a science of life that looks upon the interstellar void as fire, the nutrient substance whence comes all things owing to the cycle of Genesis conforming to immutable law. But we are absolutely determined to understand through the logic of the mind and flashes of intelligence, such as that which conceive or interpret comes to naught because of this desire to explain in concrete terms. The substance which is the void is neither hot nor cold as long as it is not in movement. To increase volume mechanically means allowing it to absorb this void, and to contract volume is to liberate the void, hence the effect of heat and cold, to generate a material from it to fix the void, and nothing in the world is more fixed than this void. What cannot be burned is the void fixed to a degree equal to the heat which acts upon it. There is a chemistry and a physics of vital logic. From purification, flesh, primitive animal life is born, but since this is not understood, it is said that there existed seeds or spores and eggs. Esotericism is mechanical logic and can only resolve mechanical problems, that is, relational of quantities. Its method is analytical because only the decomposition of its compost into its element makes it possible to understand, that is, to know and to define what compost is. By this route, we soon come to irreducible elements where analysis confront the boundary wall of cerebral intelligence, the mental faculty. This is the frontier of the earthly paradise, guarded by an angel with a flaming sword in the east where the eye of God, the sun, rises. There is no way back into this garden or fused identity because there is no inside and outside to it. Only those who have come out of it have learned to know this distinction, and to come out means to divide. It is necessary to relearn the vision of the one who is within the thing, who decays, grows, expands, lives, fructifies, and dies with it in it. On the plane, twice 2 makes 4, and twice 4 makes the cube of 2. All this by addition and movement of the plane, but it takes 27 cubes for the original cube to grow, doubling itself in all directions in space. One may add cubes to cubes, but one must be able to be cube with the cube in order to know it. This is the faculty of synthesis. We are advised as a discipline of thought to objectify every idea. The sage, to the contrary, seeks to put an end to duality. One learns to know the object, but one knows life through inborn knowledge. The definition of this is number 11. The definition of anything whatsoever in the natural or physical universe is innate consciousness. Essentially, this inborn consciousness is the final fulfillment for the mineral, affinity, for the plant, affinity, growth and generation of fruit and seed, for the animal, affinity, growth, free movement, and settable intelligence, which becomes instinct, For the human animal, all the preceding consciousnesses are innate, and reason develops, which will make man conscious of consciousness. Here begins the capacity for liberation from material form, the return after all the natural consciousness have been realized. The term consciousness is used philosophically in different ways, but always and of necessity includes a relationship between two elements and the faculty of memory. Understood in this way, consciousness of fused identity would be nonsensical. But we are also define consciousness as being that specific quality of a thing endowing it with the capacity to select by affinity, which is then a true remembering of its position in relation to other things. For example, a molecule of a simple chemical body has very precise affinities towards other molecules and makes the choice for its alliance according to surrounding conditions. There is no free will for the mineral. It is governed by predetermined necessity. In man's settlement life, affinities or association of ideas can vary, yet the fundamental function remains the same as that of the chemical affinity of bodies. Character, the quantitative definition of things, is man's innate consciousness of things, without regard for the circumstances forming this character. One can always find a physical explanation for every phenomenon, even for the tendril of a plant, unerringly reaching out for support across empty space, and this due to magnetism or because of infrared or some other radiation. It doesn't matter. The plant, like the mineral, is alive, and this tendency of tendril and not of any other part of the planet to find a way to attach itself is an aspect of plant consciousness, whose purpose in general is to feed itself selectively through affinity, to grow and to produce fruit, which is seed. To complete this idea, we should have here note the disseminal nature of the mineral according to Hermetic science. With increasing frequency, one encounters very authoritarian articles concerning the necessity of seeking a better mode of spiritual life, propounding a psychological philosophy based on the teaching of all times. It is strange to encounter complete silence in these writings with regard to the life of the mineral, which is nevertheless the foundation of all earthly life. Here something is missing, perhaps intentionally so, but which therefore should at least be mentioned, unless it is simply a matter of ignorance. The center, so to speak, of the mineral kingdom is the metal. Premetallic and postmetallic substance should be classified as metalloids. The latter reach into the plant kingdom and are found in the animal kingdom as well. Metal is thus the mineral trunk which will bear the fruit. This fruit or seed is metal itself. That is, there is a successive elimination of every substance which is not seed. Thus, there are two seeds or fruits, just as there is 7 months embryo child and a 9-month child. The first is silver, which is nature and a feminine character. The second is gold. These characteristics are not to be considered as referring to sexualized types, but each includes itself is complement, and in this two sexes reunited in one unity. The feminine silver contains the fixed male nature, and the gold is holy silver emanated by male fire. Silver, that queen of peace, can never play the feminine role for gold. Gold in the metallic realm typifies parallels the universe Christus principle. It is the natural perfection of the original intention and thus becomes the foundation stone for the return to the source. Therefore, a multiplicity of metallic individualites does not exist. There is only a single metallic state which generates metallic seed, of the white nature into silver, of the red nature into gold. Comparatively to a plant with roots in pre-metallic matter produces seeds, trunks, branch, leaves, and flowers, all apparently distinct metals, in order to bear these two seeds. The essence, the resins, sap, and exhalation of this metallic plant produces postmetallic substance. This doctrine perfectly conforms to the universe religious cosmology, and the analogies lend precision to the esoteric meaning. From this spring is real knowledge of the entire spiritual science concerning with the generation of consciousness. It is to this latter lineage that Buddhism should be related. It would be absolutely incorrect to consider the Buddha and Christ as identical. Christ is to be seen as gold, the incarnation of the divine word, man God and God man, divine in nature. To this principle is related the system of redemption, which does not appertain to the Buddha. But this does not mean there is a hierarchy of values of the divine word. But the Buddhist and Christus way are expressions of truth. However, we must distinguish between the ways that are taught. Christ, like the Buddha, is in all men, just as the seed in the pre-metallic is metal. It is a matter of bringing the seed to maturity. If the law of Genesis is unique and universe and gives rise to analogies, it is nevertheless manifested at different stages of the overall Genesis. It can therefore be applied on the one hand to the genesis of every plant, from root to flower fruit, as in psycho-spiritual practice, especially the Buddhist or Brahman, which progressively eliminate heterogenetics in order to produce the pure lotus and the seed. On the other hand, there is the way of redemption, which eliminates every impurity at one stroke and acts on the substance restored to its originality, that is the cosmic version, and produces this fruit, bypassing nature and dualization. This starts from the principle that the divine intention is perfection, consciousness of the self, earthly paradise, and conscious unity, while dualization or original sin has produced this imperfect suffering nature. Accordingly, there are two aspects of one, the same sacerdotal science, that is, Osiris and Horus. In order to understand the mystery of the highest teaching given to man, we must first know the instrument offered to us as the innumerable series of sufferings which have gone before and comprise our present life. For suffering is the only stylus whose name corresponds to the substance on which imperishable consciousness is inscribed. The stone has suffered for the plant has suffered for the animal has suffered for man, and man has suffered for redemption. And those who have gone further than we have, they are the powers and the masters who stretch out their hands to help us, as the sea stirs the desire of the sailor for the offering, or the summit challenge the daring of the mountain climber. The expanding warmth of the heart, when it reveals as rational what is generally considered irrational, when it allows us surely to cross this gulf, which we can then ignore and which terrifies the others, this warmth is the call of the master. Tendency is tension, affinity is love, appetite is need, but we must say with the proverb, I know not the way of a man with a maid. Proverbs 30, verses 18 through 19. The experience of life inscribed in matter is called innate consciousness. The specific character of such thing, the quality that is pure spirit in nature. The animal is the animal is a freely moving plant because all the phases of its gestation are fixed in its organs. That is to say, in specific individualizations, and because the root has become intestine, the leaf has become lung, the taproot has become stomach, the circulation of sap has become blood and veins, and the flower has become sex. This totality has been linked together by the marrow to form a conductive organ, the brain, and through that has become a cerebral intelligence, which is conscious memory and makes possible the expression of the innate consciousness that creates instinct. The faculty of coordination of ideas is still lacking in order for man to exist. When one beholds the emotional reactions of the animal, that is envy, hate, fidelity, love, joy, sadness, devotion to his master to the point of self-denial, one says that an animal sometimes seems human. This is a mistake. It is man who is still the animal. All emotional reactions are based on egoism, the first celibate consciousness of oneself, a mirror of the object, a free slave from a moral point of view. These emotional reactions are natural, but only man has it in him that gift, allowing him to free himself from all those reactions to attain aristocratic liberty by fusing with the whole, love without cause, without aim, without reward, and therefore without deception. I'll say that again. To attain aristocratic liberty by fusing with the whole, love without cause, without aim, without reward, and therefore without deception. This gift is reason, which makes man out of the animal. This is the second birth into the world, where nature stops at the animal, including the human animal. The baptism of the Spirit, the Pentecost which gives reason, is a second fiat lux. Reason affirms in us what the brain cannot understand, a priority knowledge. Reason shows us the nobility of the useless, which is beauty, pardon, faith, sacrifice, the sacred act. Reason is the intelligence of the heart, which allows us to, in love to be the thing, to be inside the thing, to grow with the plant, to fly with the bird, to glide with the serpent, or to be that way of a man with a maid, which is the proverb says cannot be known, to become cubit space with the cube. It is to this reason that esotericism addresses itself. But we have prostituted this reason and made it into a utilitarian rationalism, the mentality of merchants for whom the scales are the working tool, from whom everything has its countervalve, its counterweight, leading to equatorian logic, the Rutian decimal system called algebra. But in life, each moment is different from the preceding. The genesis of the world never ceases, nor the turning of the sphere, the cycles. Nothing ever returns to the same place. All in the universe is in interdependent connection with the all. Number 12. The disaggregation of any being can affect its quantity through analysis or mechanical logic, but starting with conscious man, it can affect his quality of self-consciousness. In principle, both roads lead to the same natural source, but the first is original and causal. The second is final and creative, that is consciousness, beyond nature. The first source is polarized and dependent energy, and thus destructive towards things. The second is non-polarized energy, independent of dualized nature. In nature, everything is compass, a gravity of qualities, yet energy dash spirit is not compass. Outside of nature, originality and ultimately spirit is non-polarized, but it is polarized in nature. This is yet another way of stating the theme. This energy will appear in its action upon things in triple rather than double aspect, because the poles themselves appear only in their effects. North attracts and south repels. South again, south repels. North and south complement one another, attract one another. North against north is neutral. These are the three aspects of energy. May the atomic wizards toleratorio incursion into their domain, but they have yet to understand nature as made in the image of that, the self-same God, and they have yet to perceive the reliable microscope of natural philosophy as superior to the electron microscope. To decompose the material aggregation by force is to free its void, that energy which will necessarily be immediately repolarized. Being freed arbitrarily, it remains linked to the natural thing, and like an octopus will grab onto everything in its surroundings. But pertaining to origin, this energy can act even on the elements of permanence innate in the substance of being. On the one hand, this liberation may occur in the course of a natural genesis, which always tends towards return to the original source, and by this route reaches the aim by including all the innate consciousness. Then the original dualization comes to an end. Multiplicity and variety are no longer required. The energy is no longer polarized and becomes beneficial fire, conscious, creative, and generating. Number 13. Innate consciousness is inscribed in matter and is subject to all its transformation, birth, and death, while preserving its essential characteristics, which are transmitted. Vital consciousness is inscribed in the immortal essence of material form, meaning that causal power, through the moment of awareness of all nature, seeks the possibility of its realization or self-consciousness beyond the material instrument. Let us take an example from the following illustration, directly or indirectly. Solar radiation is what makes the plant. This radiation makes a pine tree or a car, not a car, or an ear or wheat of wheat. The radiation is impartial and universal, but through the seed is specified as pine tree or wheat. From this moment on, it is characterized by the particular innate consciousness of one of these plants. When this same radiation returns to its source after passing through its material form, it bears the innate consciousness. This is not possible for a particular consciousness, which always brings back the radiation characterized by what is of the nature of what we call a pine tree or wheat. The universe, in its return, demands universality or experience for a universe consciousness. Since the radiation itself is non-specified, it is therefore in the generated seed that characteristics is fixed, and it is this which must undergo transformation in the universal genus. Take a water break here. Fixed in its material form, the seed is the part which retains acquired consciousness. Conversely, we may say it is indestructible, immutable, fixed part of a thing which represents the seed of continuation, continuation in the cycle of cosmic genesis, and attracts to itself the next radiation in order to make a new individual. This attraction by a specific fixed point necessarily makes a selection from radiation, just as the leaves and color petals of a plant selects luminous rays. This selection constitutes the adaptation of the radiance to the innate consciousness, be it a pine tree or a wheat. Therefore, neither one nor the other is the total universal radiation, the evolutionary path towards that universal consciousness which this particular seed must pursue. Thus, the genesis takes place in the fixity of matter. As the level of the human animal, all possibilities of the evolution of material consciousness are exhausted. It then becomes a question either of a physical continuity, that is, the legend of the wandering Jew, or a new baptism of spirit, allowing the original radiance to reliberate itself from matter. All experiences exhausted, meaning no further selection is to be made in the materialization of this radiance. It is received into its universality. Physical continuity makes a selection. Reliberation no longer does so. Example, the apostles speak in all tongues after the descent of the Holy Spirit. It is a moment of grace. This grace is offered to every living man. He need only utilize his acquired faculties in order to become receptive to it. It is the inspired breath of the living soul received by the Father, Adam, and preserved in a state of sleep in his descendants. This is where there may occur the only death possible. There exists the possibility of disintegration between the human being and the living soul. This death involves the conscious denial of that living soul, also known as sin, as the sin against the Holy Spirit, the most unpardonable of sin. I'll say that again. This is where there may occur the only death possible. There exists is the possibility of disintegration between the human being and the living soul. This death involves the conscious denial of that living soul, also known as the sin against the Holy Spirit, the most unpardonable of sins. Awakening is the awakening of the intelligence of the heart. Reason is born with us. If we give it preponderance over celibate intelligence over the mental, it will tell us everything, for it is the intelligence of the universe. The stages of this liberation are therefore stages of fusion. The inscription is no longer seminal. It is only a degree of detachment. Mastery of the body and all its members, mastery of thought, mastery of the passions, are only stages of liberation which allows the soul, as in natural sleep, to live in full consciousness without the material instrument, outside the definite sleep of our present body. To succeed in sleeping, thus in a awakening state, in the true clairvoyance of intelligence of the heart. And that would be simply the This is the meaning of the Egyptian Ka, K-A, the intelligence of the heart. Number 14, the faculty of hearing instinct and translating it into the brain is intuition. This faculty of translating constitutes intelligence of the heart. Intelligence of the heart is what enables man to make his way towards liberation. It is to intelligence of the heart that the scripture or oral tradition of a esoteric teaching is addressed and phrased in a manner most comfortable to that faculty, even as the risks of seemingly irrational. If we are able to prevent the intervention of reasoning, that faculty distinguishing us from the animal properties, so-called, in which we constantly abuse, then simply cerebral intelligence does no more than translate innate consciousness, as in the case of an animal instinct. Our senses suffice for the observation of instinctive effects. They are in touch with the four principal elements, which are the constitution of nature. But to know innate consciousness, we must hearken to it, make use of the spiritual sense, which is hearing. Similarly, the thumb serves as the finger of spirit in relation to the four elementary fingers of the hand. I'll say that again. But to know innate consciousness, we must hearken to it, make use of the spiritual sense, which is hearing. Similarly, the thumb on your hand serves as the finger of spirit in relation to the four elementary fingers of the hand. This is difficult, if not impossible, to explain. To hear what is nothing other than a physical silence, the voice of silence, is the faculty that makes translation possible. It is the intelligence of the heart that appears as intuition, inherited knowledge of what the brain has not yet classified as learned knowledge. In every life situation, we experience an emotion. This emotion must be heard. We have to center the hearing on the emotion in order to be conscious of our instinctive attitude towards the vital moment in question. From that instance, we know what it means, or less subtly phrased, we have an intuition of the answer to the question which has arisen. Intuition means hearing the voice of silence that speaks in all lived nature, innate in us, with a cosmic din. Intelligence of the heart is knowing how to translate this noise. Thus, the purpose of initiatory texts is for less a logical one than it is to provoke shocks, emotional reactions, or to grate against the settled need for subsequently logic, paradox, improbable image. The juxtaposition of unconnected phrases are freely employed. The texts appear to sensation to a feeling of emotional sensitivity. The truest expression, the fundamental expression, as it were, is provided by number. The faculty of enumerating is the priority of knowledge, innate consciousness of nature. Duality is relationship. It is counting. A molecule counts its affinities according to its balance. A plant seeks its support and grows upward, all discriminative in counting. An animal counts its young. But there are characteristic limits to the conscious state, to the spirits inborn in each entity. The science of number is not that of numerals, not even that of the proportion which constitutes ordinary geometry. Search as we may for combinations and series, even with the renowned golden section or golden mean, the esoterics of numbers will never be revealed to us that way. Number is living, an expression of life, and speaks directly to intelligence of the heart. Its true secret lies in the becoming of one into two. One more thing, I've got a little bit of footnote here. We suggest that true lovers of the esotericism of the golden section should study ancient Greece. Here phi and all its applications, including the development of 6 times phi, which plays the role of pi, are applied with a true knowledge of number of which the West, even in the Renaissance, was unaware. Only initiatives of the great but brief Gothic epoch, Gothic epoch, can be considered directly related to the pharaonic sages. Number 15. Rational universe and metaphysical universe do not exist as essential different entities, but there is spirit or threefold word. Likewise, there is not energy and matter. There is spirit, substance, and form. There is not a microcosm and a macrocosm. There is spirit and life. There are two banks of a river. There is the earth and the river flowing on it. Whence comes earth just as spirit or substance. produces matter through the action of form. Appearances are relative, therefore transitive. Consciousness innate in matter is purely a sequel of the phase of spirit becoming conscious of itself and all the possibilities of reflections. When no more reflections are possible, there is conscious immortality. What a thing comes from is what it returns to. Yet no cycle in nature closes at its exact starting point. Otherwise, nature would be absolute, and there would be no becoming and no return. Return to the origin is therefore only an absolute for the causal cause. It is not an infinite cycle, since the infinite, the irrational, is indefinite, whereas the return to origin is precisely the cycle which defines nature. Nothing for us is more definite than the absolute, irrational cycle, since this is what makes nature, the perceptible universe, in which no cycle can be absolute. We can never think without dividing in order to compare. The infinite is incomprehensible. Consequently, we wish for what is definite. We are in the cycle of nature, which is the circle of becoming and return. If we break it, the ring is a beginning and an end at every moment. And this break is what our cerebral intelligence demands. Reason, on the other hand, can conceive of this ring and affirm it, just as it affirms the spherical spiral in the case of swelling a spherical volume, since radio development makes such expansion impossible. Yet here again, we're only able to understand the plane spiral. Reason imposes the notion of indivisible unity, and this is absurd to the cerebral intelligence. Reason proceeds by affirmation. It does not explain, since it is inborn knowledge, implicit in everything and in ourselves. Man is a cosmos, the cosmos. There is nothing in the world which is not in him, either potentiality or in actual fact. The material form of a man is the eternal ring which through birth and death manifests the break. This break affects only the natural aspect. The circle always subsists. Nothing is more fixed than the void, nothing more stable than the cycle of becoming and return. The absolute circle, our sliding on this ring, which is the genesis of becoming and the genesis of return, gives us the illusion of movement and the attributes to this circle and magnitude through time. The break causes reflection, reaction. An electric or magnetic circuit produces a phenomenon only by virtue of interruption. Everything represents an uninterrupted electric or magnetic circuit, since all rotation produces a magnetic axis and electric equator, and since everything moves corporately in atoms or molecules, vitally in the animal cycle, the broken circuit makes a going or positive pole, and a returning relative negative pole, which is the reflection of the former. The cycle always tends to close up against, since the ring in its essence is eternal, and the link joining the corporate ends of the break is the phenomenon, the appearance of the circle. Thus, man is an appearance in the moment, the sight of the eternal ring now manifesting itself in the human being. It is nothing but a dialectic subterfuge to compare a microcosm with a macrocosm in order to show the celestial influence on subliminal things, things which endure it, for nothing can be subject to any influence whatsoever if the object is not of the same nature as the influence. A stick is powerless against spirit. Idea speaks to idea, reason to reason, reasoning to the brain. The stellar universe has no influence on the earth because the latter is identical in nature with the heavens, with their harmony and substance, and this identity of heaven and the earth is the arcanium. If there were a difference, man, the microcosm, would be a lesser quality than macrocosm man. But size does not exist for pure quality. A dog is not a microcosm. It is an element, an organ, an aspect of it, not a part, but a transitive state of it. Man, to the contrary, is a totality, and for that reason, he himself is the cosmos. This wholeness in him is virtual. It becomes actual when he, with his consciousness, is liberated from mortal contingencies. It realizes as intelligence of the heart, free of all necessary comparisons, consciousness in itself, with no further reflections, hence without break, the closed ring, the entire cosmic phenomenon. Section number 16. Everything in the universe represents one of the possibility immanent in the source of word or threefold logos. We cannot say, sorry, we could say imagery as well. Thus, each thing is the image or expression or writing of this possibility. Medul neter, in graphic form, the hieroglyphs. To transcribe consciousness, we can make use of image or hieroglyphs, or else create a conventional script. Just as the tree is virtual, in ideal form, contained in the seed, so it is the universe contained in the threefold word of the omnipresence origin. All the forms of seed are materialized in the tree of the world, and each part is one of the medul neter, the sign writing or runit one, RUNIC one, revealing the idea. In this way, we can read possibility divine entity through the manifestation of nature, that is Egypt. Egypt is the void, Devet, I should say, Daman, nectar as a general type to express a function. The most perfect and complete and truly irreplaceable esoteric writing is the pictorial representation of things, or even the synthesis of the characters of diverse things. When these medul neter are eventually organized into a system as alphabet, grammar, and syntax, and hieroglyphic writing in the result, it moves away from the original perfection, but makes it possible to address the initiative also into the minimum of error Kabbalistically, instilling a possible meaning with a human correspondence parallel to the primordial esoteric meaning. The latter is understandable to the well-prepared reader alone. The ordinary meaning is legible to everyone and serves as an excellent guide. If one knows how to look behind it specifically for the metal neter per se. We prefer to use the Egyptian words medul neter when speaking of esoteric writings in order to distinguish its intention from that of the Hellenistic word hieroglyphic, which refers to a completely organized and esoteric writing. But hieroglyphic figures are too often wrongly considered to be symbols in the ordinary sense of the term, and an error of interpretation is consequently so easily made as to be almost inedible. For the disciple in this writing, we remain profoundly indebted to this particular guy, a scholar of true genius, Champollion. I'll just spell his name, Champolilion. 17 section. The symbol is a conventional representation. The hieroglyph is direct, non-conventional uniting, I should say. And only a hieroglyph is able directly to transcribe the intelligence of the heart and be translated thereafter by the cerebral intelligence. Any other method of esoteric writing either requires the elimination of much of the grammatic form, leaving it to the reader to gather the meaning of the words without imposing a frame of reference, or else resorting to devices such as allegory, metaphor, parable, play on words, or phonetic Kabbalism. Its original meaning, the word symbol, is a synonym of coincidence, or the complex computation of two parts of a whole. In a broader sense, it has come to mean convention. In this latter meaning, it can no longer be applied to hieroglyphic signs, as the image is not the conventional representation of an object it evokes. The object is repressed by its typical features of essential characteristics. Used in this way, even color is not conventional for flora and vegetation, for the latter is green, as are moss and mildew. Each color thus corresponds to one phrase of Genesis and is connected with the two principal lines of the whole of nature, which the two crowns of Egypt represent. The strange forms of these crowns should draw attention to their real and not their conventional significance. Pharaonic hieroglyphs writings, in its essence, is not conventional as long as it's medul neter. A degree of conventionality enters into organized esoteric writing. However, the conventional choice is always made with great care in order not to stray too far from the esoteric meaning. Here below, nothing is absolute. Pictorial writing is the only means of conveyance a thought directly to the intelligence of the heart. Folks, you got to understand this is kind of really important. And I'm just saying this off the top of my head. Um, the pictorial writings in reality is esoteric. There, that's it. They knew that. We don't know that, but they knew that in order to actually be able to communicate in a deeper way for the esoteric meaning, not the exoteric, not what we think it is, because it's from up here in our head. What they're looking at is the esoteric through the heart. They knew there would only be a few that would understand. It would always be that way. It wouldn't be the many. The many would never understand this, you see. Here below, nothing is absolute. Pictorial writing is the only means of conveying a thought directly to the intelligence of the heart. I just said that. Sorry. A child reads pictures without knowing the words that transcribes intelligently to others what he experiences. A child always tries to express himself through gestures or actions. He is much closer to the truth than the learned man, for whom words with fixed meanings are merely sounds lined up in a more or less pleasing matter. Alas, for our literature. The conventional ideogram is readable in all languages. Hieroglyphic writing cannot be read in this way. It demands to be read for what it expresses in particular and to be translated later as best one can. This spoken language, like the writing, is based on Gnostic. Each letter, each root obeys a natural law, exact, living law. No letter can be pronounced without setting into action specific nerve centers. Thus, there is a vital reason for constructing their alphabetical sequence and a definite law for relating them by roots. Furthermore, in order to express themselves in alphabetical language composed of conventional signs, the sages had always employed suffrage. The most perfect method in this respect is the one we find in the original sacred texts of India and in the books of Moses before the introduction of mother vowels and then of vocal points to fix the sounds of vague, unwritten vowels, nouns, generally without connection between them, make a kind of a telegraphic style of writing. The reader has to put the sense of these words together according to what he hears or understands. Man will always be led astray by the logical meaning of an idea in the same way that he will be much more attracted by the recipe than by the philosophy. What is immediate is easy. What is useful easily attracts us, but to think in irksome, the useless irritates the lazy person. The idleness and inertial rule the whole of nature, which, in the absence of a new impulse of energy, degenerates, goes the way of least resistance, breaks up, is degraded, and falls. This applies to all things. Therefore, if we see generations of a life, it means that something new has been introduced. The literate parable is like the geometric parabolic. A focus in the center and uniform parallels rays concentrates there by reflection. Allegory, on the other hand, turns around the center like a cat around a plate that is too hot. Allegory is misleading or even childish when it tries to be sincere. Metaphor is a trick unworthy of esotericism. Play on words calls for more erudition and etymology knowledge. This means it's the most akin to the Kabbalah. It can be constructed on phonetic relationships. The Kabbalah, quote, sorry, number 18. The Kabbalah, a revelation of the esoteric meaning of the Testament of Moses, has given rise to a very false notion of esotericism. The Genesis of Moses included esotericism, but it is written in a historical style which is satisfactory to the ordinary intelligence, and is also found in evangelical key, the Passion. The Kabbalah, on the other hand speaks of the metaphysical history of this Genesis, as does the Apocalypse in the Gospels. There is a parallelism in these two modes of revelation, even though they are basically very different. Neither the Kabbalah nor the Apocalypse is an explanation of esotericism or the principal text. From another aspect of this text, esotericism does not explain itself and cannot be spelled out. It concerns the consciousness of the disciple and not a doctrine. Kabbalah or revelation has become synonymous with mystery and intrigue. Returning to the real meaning of this term, we find that there is also an Egyptian, a Buddhist, and a Christian Kabbalah. The Egyptian Kabbalah include the pyramid texts and what is called the history of the Duat, the Book of the Dead. It is a recital of the soul, analysis of the association affinities, of the aim of the endeavor to return the soul of the maleficent or beneficial consequences of the act of the living. This truly is psycho-spiritual science. In Egypt, it takes on the character of complete knowledge based on priestly science. In Buddhism, because of the absence of a fundamental myth, it assumes a more literate character. There is a close kinship between Pharaonic and the Brahman Kabbalah. The Hebrew Kabbalah, the revelation of the Mosaic teachings, comes from Egypt and retains a kinship with the origin, although modified by the nature of the Jewish mission and by several commentaries. Each of the pyramid texts is complete in itself. They are superimposed to convey different shades of meaning for certain passages. The key to such modification has been given by the meaning of the king's name. As far as the Christian Kabbalah, considered in this context, it has experienced what happens to people who live together all the time from seeing each other so often they no longer know one another. It will always seem more attractive and romantic to speak of a master in India than of a Western saint. The astral world arouses much more curiosity than a study of purgatory and so on. In fact, the asexual character of the Christian myth has colored its entire teaching with a sort of sexual inhibition, which places the Christian Kabbalah apart from the contingents of life here below. Further, its purely moral character smothers the basis of gnosis, which is as complete here as elsewhere. This is a striking contrast to the Atlantean Black Kabbalah, um, based entirely on sex, that is to say, on the sexualization or dualization of the causal cause, God, soul, singularity, and unknowable. It is tempting, especially in the Christian world, to label this theology black magic, the magic of evil, which is as innate as condemning our parents to hell for having conceived us in sin. Is the first Christmas had, sorry, If the first Christians had followed St. Paul's counsel of chastity, no one would have remained to propagate the new faith. No doubt about that. Correct. The seeker after God should look at his work. It is the book one must learn to read by breaking his seven seals. Evil as the origin is in consciousness when knowledge becomes know-how and intelligence of the heart falls into the devil's laboratory, into this brain imitator of the creative work. There is much more real evil in our rational science than in the sexual rites of the great African forest. Kabbalah is not the esotericism of sacred texts. It is the history of the soul's consciousness. History is succession in time. Esotericism is intelligence of the heart. Spatial vision, fused identity outside of time, status. Number 19, esotericism is not a particular meaning hidden in a text, but a state of fusion between the vital state of the reader and the vital state of the author. This is the sense of a spiritual, spatial, synthetic vision, which disappears as precisely the moment thought becomes concrete. Thus, esoteric teaching is strictly evocation and can be nothing other than that. Initiation does not reside in any text whatsoever, but in the cultivation of intelligence of the heart. Then there is no longer anything occult or secret, because the intentions of the enlightened, the prophets, and the messengers from above is never to conceal, quite the contrary. This last statement needs no further commentary. Everything these simple remarks could contain has already been said. May the people of our time, who by reason of the alleged comforts derived from their scientific technology are falling more and more deeply into matter, come to understand that if the end of bodily life is death, the end of what constitutes the body's life is to survive and liberate itself from what is not mortal. Number 19, esoteric is not a particular meaning hidden in a text, but a state of fusion between the vital state of the reader and the vital state of the author. This is the sense of a spiritual, spatial, synthetic vision which disappears at precisely the moment thought becomes concrete. This esoteric teaching is strictly evocation and can be nothing other than that. Initiation does not reside in any text whatsoever, but in the cultivation of intelligent heart. I think I've got to repeat here. Okay, this last statement needs no further commentary. Everything these simple remarks could contain has already been said. May the people of our time, who by reason of legend confronts a drive from their scientific technology, are falling more and more deep. Yeah, this is a repeat. For some reason, that somebody made a mistake. I don't understand that. It's kind of frustrating. To live is not to work. If we are condemned to work in order to maintain our life, the sentence constitutes the suffering through which we must acquire the intelligence of the heart that is in itself our life's spiritual aim. To base existence on work is as stupid as to find society on economic principles. Love of the task makes work joyful, and a good economic order is a secondary result. Mechanicalism, the imagination of a work consciousness, as well as valueless money, these have been the cause and means of action for ambitious leaders to drag our world into the depths of misery. Okay, out of this comes a reaction which will betray the expectation of these misguided masters. The divine spark ever slumbers in man. When emanated by a new breath, it is irresistible. We have attempted here to set forth such ideas on the meaning of esotericism. There are no words to make it clear, other than the ideas are neither explained nor even connected, except the fact as well that it should be so. As for words, their meanings must sometimes be read in different ways. The language of nader is not in the dictionary of multiplied ideas. The philosophers of modern times will find it difficult to agree on the sense in which words such as intelligence, reason, understanding, consciousness, and so forth are to be taken. Their thought does not lack for power and subtlety, but they have no knowledge of Genesis. In order to expand the vocabulary, ideas must spring from consciousness. Thus, it is useless to attempt to enrich our collection of meaningless words, even if it need to be felt. Our philosophers can elaborate philosophical systems and carry analysis as far as they like, yet in order to surmount their obstacles before them, they will always be forced to resort to faith, that is undemonstrable affirmation, or else to negation. The latter course is the easier, and appeals to the partisans of laziness and impotence, who express it through atheism or rational justified indifference. All speculative philosophy is in vain. Any explanation of life, of its origin and end, can never be more than the encircling of a central point which is logical and undefinable. Such a search is not sterile, but must cease when reason acquires the certainty that this point exists. Otherwise, it will surely become a wandering in a fog of supposition along a thousand paths leading to nowhere. How then to express oneself clearly? By image and by myth, and the sages of all times have done. The most subtle way of speaking the truth is to be found in the pure doctrine of Tao. But apart from the general directive stemming from it, the Tao Te Ching is inaccessible even to the most erudite Chinese of our day. A symbolic, even hieroglyphic principle guided the establishment of the Chinese ideogram, and therein may be found the esoteric expression. The latter has been lost in adopting the ideogram and convention, just as hieratic script causes its hieroglyphic origins to be forgotten in the alphabetical adaptation deriving thereof. Everywhere else we find myth, the Brahmin, Judean, the Christian. May Christians not accuse us of trying to deny the existence of historical reality. From our point of view, myth is a reality, and not a convention. It is a representation of the natural principle which cannot be in truth without resorting to the natural fact. That this principle should then assume a synthesis form, that is, become a incarnation, is not in the least extraordinary. The thinking of effort is character, is not a fluid flung in all directions of space. It is the idea which cannot be situated, which assumes a mental and also a bodily form when the instrument for its manifestation is given through preparation, namely intelligence of the heart and cosmic genesis. Thus the idea springs forth in the form of ideas on all sides simultaneously. The end of Pharaonic Egypt is the end of cosmic cycle and not the end of a kingdom. Osiris, through Isis, Mary, engendered Horus-Christ, already announced, contained and known in pharaonic esotericism, the time, the phase of cosmic genesis. Having arrived at the sign of Pisces, the fish, the divine child is born. He is born of spirit. He is born of the necessity engendered by the fall of the word into matter. In nature, by the rotation of the world cycles and by means of mental knowledge, the rupture of primordial equilibrium becomes self-consciousness, the conscious of at one-ment, of being within itself, what was virtually become actual through the fulfillment of all possible aspects of the form. But Jesus fell from heaven in the full perfection of nature's final form. And this is the arrow of an end. That's the conclusion of the book here. Let me get my bearings here for a second. That was written, put together in Luxor, Egypt, where him and his wife uh, were in Christmas at 1947. So this was again esotericism and symbol, and this was again by a gentleman named I forgot his first name, Schwaller de Lubicz, and that's the conclusion of this particular book. And I appreciate your attention. I hope that this makes some sense to you. His wife's name, that is, his first name is Rene. I'll read a little bit about her name was Ish. She wrote books also. She wrote some books. I'm just going to spell it to you, Isha. That's her first name, Ishar. I get Ishar. After many years of studying the medieval legacy and religion, hermetic and esoteric fields, and the manifestations in the Gothic cathedrals, Rene and his wife experienced a recognition of that same expression in the monuments of the pharaohs. Their work represents the first important breakthrough in our comprehension of Egypt since Champollion discipled the Rosetta Stone. This penetration of the monument symbolism and the intuitive reading of the glyphs situated Egypt, not Greece, as the cradle of our Western heritage. They work together to serve as a guide that will initiate the reader into the authentic tone, structure, and mentality of the Egyptian wisdom. Both Rene and his wife were masters of broad spectrum of knowledge, yet it is not them grasping of the many departments of knowledge alone which is masterful, but their transcendent understanding which qualifies them to question the achievements of our civilization. The work that they did offers direction not only to the spiritual seeker, but to the scientists and the philosopher as well. As a contemporary Renaissance man, Rene Schwaller, who in his youth studied painting with Matisse, Matisse, may fall into that category of genius shared by such luminaries as Rudolf Steiner and Emanuel Swedenborg. He combined the talents of social reformer, artist, scientist, and visionary and mystic to formulate ideas that were so far ahead of their time they seemed doomed until recently to be ignored. So thank you for being here. That's one of the books I'm going to do. There's other books that they wrote. The Temple of Man I'm going to read. The Temple in Man, the Egyptian Miracle, the Temple of Karnak, and I have a book here also called The Sacred Science. Another particular book is called The Opening of the Way, which is done by his wife. Herbach is a book by his wife. And then I've already done a reading of what we call the Study of Numbers by him. And the last one here, I don't know, this is not by either one of them. I don't know if they've got it down here. Hathor, Rising the Power of the Goddess in Ancient Egypt by Allison Roberts, PhD. Anyway, appreciate you being here. And let me do something real quick. Yeah, nearly 2 hours. That went by real quick. Okay, so this is the end of the particular reading of this particular book. And I appreciate you being here. And hopefully you'll grasp the real intentions of this book and what was meant, why, what they did. So I wish you a good night. You take care. We'll talk to you soon.